welcome to another episode of Talk That Get Results. I'm Webbo Herbert, and as per usual, we're here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category, you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line? Address it to a Let's Talk program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown, Indiana. So give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. And by the way, those will be the numbers you will use to be a part of this evening's discussion. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. Your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. With regard to your participation in the show, we encourage you to call in on the numbers listed 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized, and when getting on the show you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards, but we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. You can also follow our live video stream of this program on our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio and our YouTube channel at Vaughan Radio. Thank you all again for joining us. Your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. Tonight we have two segments of the show. The first segment, we have some gentlemen here who are going to be discussing a social issue. Part of it is religion. The other part is society as a whole. And a lot of folks have been asking for us to discuss something like this, and so we're encouraging you to weigh in. Elvin Bailey, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my fellow panelists and to the listeners and viewers to Let's Talk.
The Reverend Amos Brown, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to our listening viewing audience. And we look forward to a healthy discussion this evening on the topic, the importance of Christian values in church and community life.
And Anthony Zanki Lewis, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to our listening audience here in Ibis and around the rest of the Caribbean and even the world, because we are on the World Wide Web. And good evening to my fellow panelists as well.
It was okay to say the Honorable Anthony Lewis?
No. That's a late moment.
Okay, well, you know what we do around here. So, gentlemen, it's good to have you. The Reverend Amos Brown, is the first time you've been here?
I think, yes. I'm hesitating because I thought I might have been here a long time ago, but don't remember.
Well, talking about light moment, that will fit under that doesn't count. Because if it's so long ago, I had a conversation today, and based on the point or the argument that was made, it was settled with something like this: what have you done for me lately? So you were here a long time ago. That don't count. And Zanki, tell them who normally said that. Who normally said that?
That come from where?
No, who normally say, what have you done for me, and then put on lately?
The of blessed memory?
Anyway, Elvin, you know?
I don't, sir. I'm a bit young for this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That was only coined a few years ago, so I don't know. Anyway, you'll find out one of these days. So that's a light moment to start the show. So, who's got the first comment on the topic?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, we ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
All right. Okay, let me start out with an introduction and say that Christian values are the spiritual and social principles and beliefs based on the life and teachings of Jesus as found in the four Gospels, but particularly in the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 5 to 7, and the Sermon on the Plain in the Gospel of Luke, 6, 17 to 49. Let me hasten to say that in the area of comparative religion, each faith subscribes to its own particular set of principles and beliefs, some of which may or may not overlap with ours as followers of the way. Let me also hasten to add that not all Christian values that are important to us today were necessarily a concern or a priority of the early Christian communities. Christian values are the bedrock of many a foundational document and motto of nation states and organizations, including the institutional church. Here's a quotation. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, persons, are created equal, and the Latin phrase e pluribus unum, replaced by in God we trust, in more modern times are familiar to many in our listening audience. So is country above self, and so also is the view that all persons are created in the image of God, and therefore, regardless of their gender or sexual orientation, are of sacred worth and deserve the ministry and guidance of the church without prejudice. Now, for the purpose of subsequent conversation this evening, let me identify a few areas that are critical to the evening's theme. 1. Marriage versus committed relationship. 2. Church attendance versus at-home internet worship. 3. Servant team leadership style versus autocracy. 4. Home caring for the elderly versus institutional care. 5. Civil disobedience versus subserviency. And 6 is a question: has the church abdicated her responsibility as the promoter of Christian values? And I'll just flesh these out real quickly, starting with number 1. The sanctity of the marriage covenant between one man and one woman is a time-honored principle in our community. However, there has been a gradual erosion of that principle in the last half century or more, where couples have decided to move in together without tying the knot, and the courts seem to sanction that. The recent pandemic taught us that genuine Christian fellowship is really attainable by way of social media. During that period, our household became a regular YouTube listener and viewer to the Washington National Cathedral weekly services. However, as a regular church attendee for practically all my life, I maintain that there is no substitute for in-person worship services. Now, Scripture enjoins us as servant leaders, clergy and lay alike, not to lord it like dictators over the people whom we serve. A shared vision of set goals and objectives should always be the preferred choice of leadership, especially in a democratic system of governance. Now, there continues to be a tension among some sections of our citizenry that it is morally objectionable to assign the care of our aging family members to a nursing home. But in some situations, a care facility may be the only viable option available. It is not beyond the normal bounds of conscience to disobey cruel and unjust laws that engender systemic racism or impose severe economic burdens on vulnerable communities. And the last one I named in the question form, one gets the impression at times that certain social justice issues for which the church should be taking the lead in championing are relegated to ministries of government instead. So, Webbo, that's my opening statement, and we look forward to discussion on that.
Okay, and then who's next?
Yeah,
Anthony.
I'll take it here. I take a different look at this, the importance of Christian values and the church in the community. And so I have pointed out here what is the church and what is Christian values, and then what is the community, and try to describe them from a biblical point of view and from a Christian point of view. Now, what is a church? A church is a community of believers who gathered for worship, fellowship, and ministry, both locally and globally, united by a shared faith and purpose. It's a place where people can experience God's love, support one another, serve in the world, and emphasizing the importance of relationship and shared experiences within the Christian faith. As a Christian, the church, as a community, has a threefold mission: worshiping God in thought, word, and deed, discipling believers or discipline believers, not as a punishment, but as we sometimes think, but a kind of self-discipline in the things that we think, the things that we say, and the things that we do, and sharing the gospel with the world. And I'm going to use the Methodist Church here because that's the church I know, but it's from a Christian point of view. In the Methodist Church, the values include justice seeking, adhering to ethical teachings of the Wesley tradition, living faithfully and hopefully, and seeking to improve the lives of all. We also value the fruits of the Holy Spirit, such as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and generosity. Methodists believe that the importance of Scripture, tradition, reason, and experience in their faith. These are key components of the Great Commission as presented by Jesus, and by the very nature can only be fulfilled in the company of others. Matthew 28:18 and 20. In fact, it says God did not call us to silo, which means to be isolated by ourselves, work in isolation effort, rather in community for maximum impact. Jesus promised that where 2 or 3 more gathered as his followers would assure his presence. You'll find that in Matthew 18:20, and become the sacred community that is committed to connecting each other and to God. This is the ultimate expression of the church and community. The New Testament authors, inspired by the Holy Spirit, encourage us towards community which serves like bear one another's burdens and to fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians 6 and 2, you'll find that. Exhort one another daily, so that you are not hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. James 3 and 13. However, it is my view, that the church is a community, as a community, must possess the Christian values to fulfill the Great Commission as presented by Jesus. So as we talk about Christian values, 3 of the core values of Christian values: love, kindness, forgiveness. Many Bible verses incite Christian values. For instance, 1 Corinthians 13:4 and 7 discuss love. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It does not self-seeking. And it does not easily angered. It keeps no record. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoiceth with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hope, always preserve. And then in Ephesians 4:32 emphasizes the kindness and compassion. Be ye kind and compassionate one to another, forgiving each other, just as Christ has forgiven you. And the last one I have here with forgiveness, which is Matthew 6:14. It says, it's focused on forgiveness. For if you forgive and other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. These verses guide the living of lifeline Christian values in the church and the community. And lastly, what is community? And sometimes you have to go to the dictionary to find out one of the things that... So I choose Oxford Dictionary to list one of the things that Oxford said about community. It says a group of people living together and practicing a common ownership. This characterization speaks well to the importance of the mindedness when living as a community of believers. In fact, Scripture addresses the dynamics and states, can two people walk together without agreeing on a direction? That'll be Amos 3:3. And how wonderful it is, how wonderful and pleasant it is when brothers live together in harmony. And that will be Psalm 133 and verse 1. Community, all creatures of the Lord, and we are responsible for the ways in which we use and abuse it. So there's a lot of things about community, because can't go through all of it right now, but I just point out that we have community, economic community, we have social community, and we have the political community, and the list goes on. It all forms out. Webbo, I'll rest there and wait for the questions and answers.
And Mr. Bailey.
Well, good night again. I want to go back to come forwards. I want to tell you our presence here tonight is not by happenstance. It's part of what the Methodist Church celebrates around this time every year, Local Preachers Week. And this is one of the activities that we are keeping in recognition of that week and the role local preachers play in the development of God's kingdom here on earth. The topic, as we've heard, is the importance of Christian values in the church and community life. And we've heard from two esteemed persons in the Reverend Brown and former circuit steward. You call him Zanki. So I want to take out of this discussion to distill the values. They have mentioned some of them, of course, the Christian values that we are talking about. And I use as my launching pad this question that is in the Bible. What does the Lord require of you? And the answer in Micah 6 verse 8 is to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. How do we do that? First thing, one of the values is to worship God. And we can discuss how one worships God and where one worships God. And Reverend Brown has already alluded to one of those points in his opening statement. Be kind to everyone. Be humble. Be honest. Live a moral life. Be generous with your time and your money. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be self-righteous. Don't retaliate, turn the other cheek, as the Bible tells you. And that perhaps will generate some discussion of its own a little later. And of course, forgive others. If we follow those values, those examples, those teachings, then we would have a better community, because these Christian values promote peace and goodwill among people following the purposes of God. The antithesis really is what are the worldly values, and they include wealth, power, pleasure, revenge, fame, vanity, and status, which I want to replace with the word idolatry. And these are the most important things to people who perceive no power or purpose beyond themselves. That is something that we are here tonight and discussing about how we move from a situation where people perceive no power or purpose beyond themselves to following Jesus, his example, obeying the Micah mandate, and achieving some of those things that Reverend Brown has already identified.
This topic is very dear and interesting to me, and in terms of, we are called a Christian society, is that correct?
So,
Yes.
What does that mean? Because Christian, when people say you're a Christian, the connotation naturally and generally is you're saved by grace, and when the eventuality comes and there's a choice between up and down, that person is supposed to go up based on our culture, correct?
yes, but there is two sides to that, Webbo. You have Christian. Somebody say, I'm a Christian. It means that they're from the Christian religion, as opposed to you're Christian and you're born again Christian, saved by grace. So, if somebody is said they are Christian, they could mean, well, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Rastafarian, but I'm from the Christian religion.
But
Like you're quite right. Most people, when they think of I'm a Christian, they think of you're saved by grace, but it doesn't always be that.
the truth is never that, right, Reverend? Because people will, for instance, people will accuse me of being a Christian. Notice what I said. I deliberately put it that way. They would accuse me of being a Christian, and therefore I wasn't supposed to say that or do that.
Yeah.
So I just want to differentiate, if you will, because I often use the term as well. We are a Christian society, and that sometimes, based on our culture, implies that we more than likely will do godly things, go to church, 10 commandments, if you will, etc. Reverend.
Yeah, I think Brother Lewis is right. You see, by the Christian is a nickname. The disciples after the resurrection and after Pentecost, of course, the disciples, as they carried the word around, were behaving to the observers. They were acting like Christ. They were behaving like Christ. So they nicknamed them Christians. However, back to Brother Bailey's point and your question, and Brother Lewis's point and your question, being a Christian doesn't mean that you, well, let me put it this way. A practicing Christian is different from just a person being labeled a Christian. Being saved by grace and being forgiven by God through Christ and living that life, that is practicing it. But people say we are a Christian nation. That is in name only. So we call that kind of Christianity nominal Christians. People, Christian in name only. Difference, as Brother Louis said, different from being a Muslim, practicing the Islamic faith, or a Hindu, or any of the comparative religions.
So the difference between all is, one is a practicing Christian, which denotes saved by grace and hopefully will on that day.
Right.
And
Can
the
I
other
jump
one.
in here, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
I found it interesting you use the term accused you of being a Christian, because that says to me that somebody, hopefully not you, is allowing others to define what a Christian should be or is, as opposed to using the biblical mandate to define a Christian, a follower of Christ, as you said, I'm saved by grace and so on. But it begs the question, really, because my understanding is that, and the example you gave of, they say you shouldn't have said that. Jesus himself was a revolutionary. He turned over the thing in the temple when they were defiling the temple and so on, and he broke a lot of norms, quote unquote. So their norms, those other people's norms, were broken by Jesus Christ while he walked on earth and so on. And he had his own definition of what his life should be, following the mandates of his Father. So it's interesting that we've come up with this thing, the accusation, because the accusation, the allegation, really is based on their premise and not on the biblical premise.
Well, that's interesting. So what we have established so far, based on what the Reverend has said, is that that I gather that there are practicing Christians, and those are those who we expect will go up. That's funny.
Heaven on earth, sir. Heaven on earth.
I'm just using, well, you said Jesus used different terms, right? And he was a revolutionary, so
He was a revolutionary,
I'm trying to be a revolutionary by using the terms that we use. Okay, so do you have the practicing Christians, and you have the Christians by name only, who just happen to be part of a society of quote-unquote Christians, and that's the name only Christians. So in any given society, and let's use us as an example of the society, it is fair to categorize us in two general categories. One, practicing Christians, and two, those of us who are Christians by name only.
Nominal Christians.
Nominal Christian. Okay, so let me write that so I don't forget. Practicing Christian and nominal Christians. Okay. What the practicing Christians then are those who follow the precepts of the Bible, the 10 Commandments, etc., etc. And the nominal Christians are people like me who just do as I feel. So that's an example of a nominal Christian. Okay, and that's why the person lady had accused me of being a Christian, because she thought I wasn't a practicing Christian when I supposed to be. I'm just a nominal Christian. Correct? Okay, so in our society, let's look at our practicing Christians and the value of those principles for the society, which is the main topic of discussion. What should we, what are the things that we should do, and do we feel that if we were to follow these guidelines, would we have a better society?
Well, I don't know if I would say we'll have a better society.
But that's not the reason why the society begs for the church to be more involved in the community and in the society, to impart what the practicing Christian practice. No?
Yes,
And
sir.
as a consequence of that, when we do that and say that and ask for that to be done, we're supposing and arguing that we'll have a better society. I think so.
Well, no one is perfect. And even the practicing Christians fall short. Right? No one...
Right, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. But a war has in many battles. You can lose a few battles, but you can still win the war. You're not going to win every battle. But at the end of the day, did you win the war? Correct? So we understand that practicing Christians doesn't mean that you didn't make any mistakes. You didn't do anything that's wrong.
Well, that goes to your point where you're saying, Webbo. Somebody will meet you and tell you, you shouldn't do that because you're Christian. But they probably don't know why I did what I did, or what caused me to do what I've just done. But they just look at me and, oh, you're a Christian, you shouldn't be doing that. I think only one person could really fix that, and that is God, Jesus Christ. Because we all fall short of the glory of God.
But then the people who said that though, and would accuse you thus, they're doing their role in life.
How? You mean to keep me in line?
No, not necessarily. They'll all.
I think, Webbo, if I may, I think sometimes the onlookers are correct in that we should not do that. And I think that this whole thing has a continuum from nominal, as Reverend Brown was saying, to practicing, and parts in between. And Zanki is correct. We're humans. We fall short. The thing for me is when we fall short, when we are perceived to have fallen short, the thing in my view to do is to ask for forgiveness, to recognize that there is something here that is perhaps preventing you and your faith from shining through, and to try to correct what it is, if it is in fact something that was incorrectly done, or to explain the foundation for that action which you have done. Because as Zanki said, sometimes they don't know the shoes that you're walking in. So sometimes an explanation, and sometimes a just, forgive me, I missed, turn the other cheek, as the Bible says in one of those
How, if we were to successfully impart the Christian values and the practices, if you will, of the church, if we were to successfully able to impart them in the society as a whole, then what outcome would we expect? Would we have a better society because of those values and so on?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that exactly, I think, is the focus of this topic, and I guess is the desired outcome, a better community, or a better society, people doing the will of God. A practicing Christian is one who faithfully does the will of God. And the will of God is spelled out in so many places, as we said in the Sermon on the Mount, and well, it's written all over. As Brother Bailey said, the Micah's mandate. What does the Lord require of you, O man, but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before thy God.
And Brother Bailey had also indicated the revolutionary style of Jesus. You think the fundamental ask of Jesus was basically to just do good, be fair, and basically do what is right. And if you do that against the backdrop of him changing up a lot of the laws that he made, that he met, and then even when, for instance, there was something which was seemingly reasonable and a common practice. For instance, when he asked the question, if you had animal or something and it fall in a pit on a Sunday or worship day, notwithstanding they had argued, well, certain things you don't do on the Lord's Day. And he asked, well, wouldn't you pull it out?
That's part of the revolution I referred to. A redefinition of what is work and what is doable and when it is doable.
Right. So therefore, it isn't necessarily a regiment of rules, but if you take certain things case by case, as again was demonstrated in some of the stories, the illustrations that he gave, because let's look at the one when he said those fellows who were invited found the fool and didn't bring any spare oil. And then when you came and you asked me, well, where will lend me some oil? And I said, no. Don't you think that's kind of harsh? Some people will argue, well, suppose something bad had happened to them but he was demonstrating that was fair. To tell them no.
Well, if you really, to follow from what you just said, if you follow that story, it was all about preparation, which we have to do. If you don't prepare yourself, for instance, to meet your card, and a good example of that is those people with Noah and the ark. They were told, come into the ark. He preached, they cussed. But when things start to happen, they run in, come in, but the door was already shut. So
and that was okay.
And that was okay.
Right. But what happens in the society, does it not? That when a leader sets out certain guidelines and they're not followed, and then the consequence comes, depending on the consequence, people find it is unfair. Not correct?
Yes, human.
So when we apply the Christian, how easy it is then to apply the Christian principles, the church values in the society as a whole.
Webbo, I look at it that we as Christian, and those of us who are, as we use it, practicing Christian, we can't just leave that like so. It has to be a continuous repetition of the same thing that we're doing that is right. And somewhere down the line, somebody gonna say, well, he can keep on doing this, it must be good. So let me go this route. So we just can't, for instance, preach it, act like it, and because nobody's studying you, they still go in their merry way, you just give up. So it's a live thing. You have to be going on and on, and that's why we try to worship every Sunday. Because the minute you start to stay away, you might miss something. And we talk about the community. That is coming together with the community of one faith. When we come together, we are stronger. It's a good old saying, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So when we are together, we are stronger. And we send a better and a clearer message to the, if you want to call it, general community.
What you're giving me,
that example.
what you're explaining to me there is a theory,
Yes.
not the actual practicing stuff.
But you have to practice the theory.
Oh, okay. So that's what I'm saying. So what you're explaining to me is a theory, but
Yes.
not telling me what actually happens.
My grandmother used to tell me, Webbo, leave them at the foot of the cross. Do as much as you can, and at some point you have to leave them at the foot of the cross to make their own decisions.
But Granny is right, because that's what Jesus did. He came and he put the work in, and he allowed everything to be fulfilled as we celebrated Easter, because that's just how it is. Yes, Reverend.
No, I was thinking as you were talking there, choices have consequences, and being a Christian does not abrogate that principle, because if a Christian, if a person makes certain choices and the consequences turn out to be negative, bad for them, it doesn't mean that because that person is a Christian that those consequences are not going to occur. That Christian person made some bad choices, and the consequences follow. Being a Christian doesn't abrogate that. That is what's going to happen. So, Christian values. When a person does something wrong, and whoever is going to administer the consequences, it doesn't mean that that person who is administering it is doing a non-Christian act.
That's the discipline that you referred to.
That's right, the discipline that our brother here was referring to in his statement.
Do you think it would have been easier to have a society living by Christian values and the involvement of the church if that society were not as brilliant as it is? Do you get the question, or you want me to reframe it?
Go again.
Rephrase it.
The fact that most people in our society can read and read the Bible themselves and are of a certain level, if you will, of education. So they have their own interpretation, etc., etc., etc. So I'm asking, if we didn't have a society that is of that level of education, etc., do you think it would have been easier to have that society taught by, let's say, the preachers, the local preachers, the ministers, and so on and so forth, and so they will better cooperate?
Well, that's a part and parcel of the Christian religion society. You have to teach, because if you don't teach what you know, based on the Bible in particular, then people will fall by the wayside and say they don't know. Look at an example, and I always use Jesus as an example because he walked here among men, and he basically was just always chastising the Jews and the Pharisees and the scribes and so on. Those are the educated people. But when he spoke and when he teach, he come down to grassroots and always like to read the gospel because the parables was really meant for the people who weren't educated, for it, if you want to use that word, because it came down to grassroots and they understand the ordinary living. Some of them started to follow him because of that.
Okay. Are you suggesting, therefore, that Jesus had a harder time, a more difficult time convincing those persons who were more educated?
Yeah, definitely.
Reverend, you agree with that?
Well, if you look, it's difficult to say. Many of the Jesus's followers were the ordinary people. That is true, but my teachers used to tell me that my New Testament teachers used to tell me that the disciples, for instance, they have been characterized as unlearned and uneducated, but they really were not. These were people of means materially, and they were educated. If you look at Matthew and you go down the list.
You see, but let me ask this: isn't it possible that is not educated as opposed to being uneducated? Because if you go back to some of the miracles that Jesus did, O ye of little faith, or I've not seen so great faith, I touched the hem of his garment and you were healed. But this lady next to me saw me do it, got healed, and went and did the same thing, and the devil remained in her. What's the difference? I believe.
Can I jump in here again, sir?
Yeah, yes.
Because I want to go back to the question you posed to Reverend Brown about educated persons being harder or easier to convince. And I made a note here: street smart versus book smart. And it appears to me that in the biblical references that Zanki referred to, or should I call you Brother Lewis, referred to, they were the book smart people, and Jesus spoke to the street smart people and got his message across. I also wrote down here, what's the difference between brainwashing and conscious decision making? And a question you posed earlier made me make that note that the persons who are not as educated and not as learned, but are street smart and so on, you can't brainwash them so easily either. And also, I mean, I've seen situations where as people rise up the academic ladder, they fall down the spiritual ladder. Not all, but some. And I don't have empirical data to show whether there is a link between the PhDs and the spiritualism and so on.
But I can give you an illustration to use that. I mean, to make your point in that regard, where when Jesus said, and a lot of us sometimes misconstrue it, about the rich man getting into heaven, he didn't say you can't get in. He said it's very hard, and the reason being because he probably spent so much time thinking about those riches that he doesn't have time to think about the other thing. So as you were saying, getting in rising up that ladder and getting to that thing, that's perhaps can be a reason why.
Yes.
To get back to both sides of the kind there about the uneducated and said the educated. Jesus knew more than them who were educated, but he didn't lord it over those persons and speak like them who were educated in a way that, because to every step they make, he had an answer for them. I mean, when you, and we talk about in colloquial time people speaking bad words, but Jesus used some bad words, right? And sometimes when I look back at it, when you call those persons, you like you are whitewashed tombstones. Every time I study that and I think of a tomb, it says inside of you is dead bones, no good. But you have on a nice wash outside, you put on your gown and you know, and you show off. But inside of you, your heart ain't good. And those kind of things that does really catch me when I start to think about people who are educated, especially the Jews and the scribes and so on. They knew the law. But what Jesus said them, son, if you break one, you break all. So he said, it's not what goes inside of you, it's what come out. So it's not the type of food that you're eating.
Reverend, based on what Brother Lewis is saying, and maybe time for another light moment, Brother Bailey is okay to call me Brother Webbo.
Yeah.
Definitely, sir.
You're getting there,
Yeah, but so if I'm listening the points that are being made, is it fair for me to conclude to get to the door of to get to be a practicing Christian, which everybody should, go towards? Is it better for me not to be very educated?
No, we won't say that.
I won't say that.
No.
But Brother Lewis seems to be suggesting, and he keep referencing the hard time that Jesus had with the Jews and who else?
The scribes
The scribes and so on, because they were very educated. That you don't think can get somebody nervous? Because he seems to be suggesting that if you are not so brilliant and educated, somehow you can better accept what somebody is telling you, no?
The whole thing of those scribes, and they knew the law. And every time Jesus do something which they think was not with the law, they get off. And what he said to them, think that I have come to destroy the law. No, I didn't. I came to fulfill it. So when you say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, I say, if you don't do that. If somebody slap you, that's what Jesus said, you don't slap them back.
Reverend,
You take it.
the society, some people argue, is built on what is fair. Even laws, the structure, what is fair. You think people have, just like we breathe and don't know or can't control it, you think people by that design as well know what is right from what is wrong, from just being a human being, or that has to be taught? Because I get the feeling that people know, even kids, they know when things are fair, reasonable, right or wrong, no?
Of course, we God made us, or created us with what we call free will. Okay, and all persons have a conscience.
With respect, Reverend, did you say that correctly?
All persons?
All persons have a conscience?
Yeah.
You said it correctly?
Yeah. You don't believe that?
No, I just checking. I am a fellow who just check things.
He didn't say whether it's good or bad.
No. Yeah, go ahead. I just checking some things I make notes of. All persons have a conscience.
Yeah, I mean, every person has a conscience. Is that what? That's what
I bet you, Reverend, you're going to have a debate with that, you know, as you go on.
I know you're coming from there, Webbo. Because some people say, boy, you don't have a conscience.
No, I'm not talking about what some people say. I'm just checking what Reverend told me.
Yeah.
All persons have a conscience. Okay, can I use that for the quotation of the day tomorrow?
Yes, of course.
So I have noted it. Okay, go on, Reverend.
Now you made me lose my train of thought.
Oh, okay. It was designed for that because I really wanted you I really wanted you to think about it.
Back to this. Something is bothering me. Back to this education and was it easier for Jesus to win over people that were educated? Was it easier for him to do that than? Was it easier for Jesus to win over the uneducated than he was to win over? And you cited examples of the scribes and the Pharisees. I got to thinking, you know, well, this is a matter of faith, okay? And faith is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with academic qualifications. Faith is a gift from the Creator. Faith is a gift from God.
Which everybody is given.
Right. And it is a matter of receiving, accepting the gift. So the gift is there. It comes through grace. That's what grace is. God's love, God's favor toward us all.
So why is it that people go contrary then?
Because they do not accept the gift.
Okay,
It's freely given, it's freely received.
And what is it fair to conclude or assess? We do not affect the gift because there is some intervention by you know who. Because remember that the struggle for every soul, there's a battle for every soul, you know, between God and the other fellow, and good and evil. So every time a person hears a case, I'll make a case, Reverend, and I know that I've made my case, and the other person who I'm making the case know that I've made my case, and they said no still.
Yeah.
But different points of views.
No, walk with me, Reverend. I'm making a case. You know that I've made my case based on what you just talked about, because everybody has a. Let me read it again. all persons have a conscience, and everybody knows what is fair or not. But as you are grading or making the decision, there is some intervention. That's not correct? There is a fellow who is meddling I've made my case, and you say, but somebody says, as you're about to say yes, somebody says, say no. Because we won't bring him in the conversation all night. And we need to let everybody know Satan is real.
Definitely. But that's faith we're talking about. Well, if you really...
Let me take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening. I just wondered about that comment about the more educated person some people get, the less likely to lose their spirituality. And could it be that the education that we have, systems that we have, and the higher up we go, the more this is so. They are supposed to teach us rational thought, logical thinking, and generally science-based, evidence-based conclusions, right? Isn't that a contradiction in terms of faith, which basically asks you to accept whatever the tenets of the religion is, unquestioningly? That's the first thing.
Before you go on to the second thing, if I'm interpreting you correctly, right? This education and the higher up you go and stuff like that, the fundamental thing is basic, you know. Is it not a fashion to now deviate from what brought you even to that educated level? Because now you see, when people reach a certain stage or level, it's like, do you know that Satan was an angel? Are you aware of that, Carla?
In other words, you're saying that they're more questioning, right?
Not only they're more questioning, they now want to get to where Brother Lewis is. And that's what, right, because remember when Satan was trying to overthrow Jesus, what did he use? The same word. And trying to, you're following me, right?
Yeah.
So that is basically what is happening. When a fellow now believes that he gets so bright, that he wants to now show off, as we say locally, and the person who probably didn't go to school or college, but still have that reasoning power. And as a consequence, a lot of the times, he make a fool out of himself with his brightness.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way.
Okay, well, what way would you put it?
I would say that he has a point about religious people having blind faith. It's a requirement of the religion. It's a requirement of Christianity. You don't question certain things. And that goes against, it's not a matter of showing off.
Who said that? Who said Christianity? What you said there again about blind faith?
That Christianity, for you to be a true Christian, I'll use the word true in inverted commas, you have to believe the tenets of your faith.
Who told you that?
You can't produce, you yourself can't produce evidence, concrete evidence of a lot of things that the faith claims.
No,
right?
Work with me. It doesn't work like that, you know. That's when you're getting too bright. Jesus tell the disciples, follow me. Walk with me and I'll take care of you. So what you're not suggesting to me that these people follow him blindly? That was the requirement.
Exactly.
And remember, human beings are made that way. So you don't go.
Not all, but that's the whole point. Not all human beings. If
Or some made
come
different.
tomorrow and say, "Follow me," I ask why.
Walk with me. Some human beings are made different.
What's that?
Some human beings. You said not all human beings. What
No,
happens?
not all human beings
No.
follow blindly.
No. That's not. I don't know what you mean by this blindly. You're
We're
not.
questioning. Like I just said, you
No, you
have to
don't-
follow you.
You don't have
I'm
to.
going to ask why.
But you don't have to question.
Why not?
No, walk with me.
Suppose it's
Walk with me. If I tell you my name is Webbo Herbert, you don't have any issue with it. With the questioning?
With what? That your name is, you say your name is Webbo Herbert?
Yes.
Why should I question it?
But this is what I'm saying. So therefore, when people...
But if you tell me, Webbo, I am Webbo Herbert, I am God, I'm going to question it.
Yeah, but you see, I wouldn't tell you that.
Oh.
The practicing Christian will not tell you that. The practicing Christian who tells you that comes under the form of the fallen angel. You agree with that?
I don't understand the term fallen angel.
Okay. Do you walk with me? Do you understand Satan?
I know of Satan. I know that.
Oh, okay. So that is another name for him.
Okay.
So you understand now?
So you're equating the fallen
No,
angel.
walk with me. Walk with me. Do you understand now?
I don't
You're just like
understand
my
where
friend
you come
here who, when I made my case, no, I made my case and still say no.
I don't understand.
Okay, we gotta leave it there. What
You
we're
don't want to
gonna
hear my second question?
do? No,
Okay.
no, walk with me. We will continue the conversation, right? So keep listening.
Okay.
I have to close off this first segment, but we will continue the discussion in the second segment.
Okay.
But I only contracted the Reverend and the brothers for an hour. Is
I
that
would have liked to have heard his take on this.
who? Whose take?
The Reverend.
Reverend, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
So you, I have conceded to you. You're not going to say I'm conceding blindly.
No, well, you're conceding with reason. So that's what I want the Reverend to answer.
Okay.
Is the contradiction.
No, walk with me. I'm going to let you, but you're not going to say that I conceded blindly.
You conceded, you said?
Yes, I concede that I'm going to let you walk with me.
Blindly or not?
I am going to allow you to continue and ask the Reverend the question, but I'm asking you, you're not going to say that I conceded to you blindly.
I would hope not.
Okay, Reverend,
I hope it's because of what I said.
okay, Reverend is listening.
Yeah, I just wanted the original question that I asked about the fact that we train people to be questioning, to think logically, evidence or science-based conclusions are drawn, but religion generally requires us to have blind faith. You don't question things like that, right? Isn't that a contradiction? And isn't that what really accounts for the fall off in spirituality as you go higher up the education ladder, where you want more evidence, you think logically, you don't take things as simply because somebody say, well, that's how it always has been, this is what I came up with, those kinds of things. There is the inquiring mind that is at that level that can just take things just as it's dished out. You know, they have to ask why.
Caller, Brother Lewis wants to answer the question.
If you could answer me this, do you know what is faith?
Well, I am hoping that I'm right in saying that it's basically believing in something. I didn't want to use the word blindly, right?
Yes, you won't get in more
That's
trouble.
me got in trouble with Webbo.
This until we could understand what
believing in
faith is,
something,
right?
believing
We
in
can't
something,
really talk about
that you
it.
can't
Faith,
necessarily
faith, so that you know, right?
Mm.
Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Right. The evidence
Okay,
of things not
that is
exactly.
faith. So if you have faith, I mean, you had faith that you were calling here and Webber would have been talking to you. You didn't see it, but it happened. That is faith. So I don't understand the kind of blindness
but
that
in
you're
your
talking
definition
about.
you said without evidence, and that is what the point I was making. That is where the blindness comes in, without evidence.
But you don't have to have evidence to have faith.
I agree. That's why I totally agree. But what I was saying, I was explaining. Somebody was asking the question, was making the observation that the higher up you go in education, the less spiritual you are. And that is what I was saying, that it's that lack of evidence that faith demands, which they have a problem with. You see?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Brother Bailey.
Yes, sir. Yes, Brother Webb. Brother Webbo Herbert,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes. Yeah. I was checking to see if you wanted to come in.
No, sir.
Okay. Anybody? Reverend? Brother Lewis?
We good. We closing off now?
The guys on the second segment told me that they got some faithful instructions to allow us to go on. By faith, we should continue.
Okay.
So, any other point? Okay. Well, I wanted to make the point because I find the discussion is interesting, and that is why it's always good to hear people's views. There's an older adage which says, and I'll tell you why I bring it in at this point, so just walk with me. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If anybody ever saw a demonstration of that, it may well fit into what the caller, some of the points he was making about as people go further up the ladder, they begin to question more about things. And to see what happens, I have realized with people who get power, they start out little by little, and then they now want to remake the world to show how great they are and powerful. I like to watch documentaries and history, and I was looking at, they were doing some documentaries of the Holocaust. Anybody heard about the Holocaust? And it is the 80th anniversary. And one of the things they're pointing out is, lest mankind forget. Should never forget that. And they interviewed a gentleman, and you know, if it is the 80th anniversary, what kind of age the survivors must be. And the gentleman was slow. And I like people who talk slowly. You get their attention, and perhaps they can persuade. And he said, the Holocaust did not fall from the sky. Evil occurs step by step. When people get a taste of power, they begin to see how far they can go. and how far they can go. And that is why I said until they begin to feel that they can remake the world. And that's what happened with Satan. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
And that, it doesn't automatically be that way. But that's the danger that happens when people get very, very educated sometimes, or get so powerful, or get so rich. And that is why Jesus had mentioned, not for everybody, but it's going to be hard for a rich man to enter, because his focus is on these riches. And they forget the part of the brain that is so powerful that can make them, as somebody was talking about, have so much faith that they don't have to have the money to move the mountain. The faith can move it. And that's what Jesus used. And this other clown who fell and then tried to trick Jesus. Reverend, I don't know if I should say this way, but I, as a fellow, have to say how I think. Some people argue that after Satan had tempted Jesus enough, Jesus, anybody can remember what Jesus said in the end? What Jesus told him? To get him...
Get this.
Well, after each temptation, Jesus
Yes.
said something after each temptation.
Right, but the last one when he left, so get thee behind me. Now, see whether or not you agree, Reverend, and the other option you have, you don't have to answer. Some people argue that were it in our contemporary time, Jesus wouldn't say, get thee behind me. He'll use some other words that are not written in the Bible. But it means the same thing. Not correct, Brother Bowie?
I am nodding because I agree with you. So
Oh, okay.
You preach a powerful sermon tonight. Yes.
So, in other words, I made my case.
You've made your case.
Okay.
But interestingly, in that same thing, when Jesus told Satan, get thee behind me, the Bible continues to say, Satan went away until another time, an opportune time came to do what you have been talking about all night.
But that's the fascination, the intrigue about life, and having conversations, and that's why Brother Lewis had mentioned how good it is to commune, and you could go to church and see your brethren every now and then, you know, and talk and discuss. Because I, for one, I grew up in the Bible, and every time I read a passage, I probably read it 100, 1,000 times, and there's a different perspective.
Yeah, every time.
Right? And every time you have a problem and you go and you read to the Bible, I read the Bible, the answer is in there. So I find it interesting. So, Reverend and brothers, we are, your mission is to see whether or not we can get the church more involved, the practicing Christians more involved with the nominal Christians, to see how we can unite more.
Bring everybody along.
And then, as a consequence, we will have more practicing Christians than nominal Christians.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. We want to make it the first one tonight.
Which one you want to make me?
The practicing one.
So that implies I'm a nominal Christian at this point.
Well, that's what you said earlier.
Yeah, but well, maybe it's time for a light moment for the Reverend. A lady told me once that I should get saved because I'm radio every morning and preach. So I need to give my heart to the Lord.
Well, that's judging, and we won't do that.
Well, I told them.
Let me tell you, I really appreciate your devotion in the morning when you come on, your prayers, sometimes the scriptures that you read, and I would say to my wife, I said, but wait, where Webbo gets all this stuff from? And I don't see him in church, and yet he's praying well, he's using the right words, he's reading appropriate scripture, and so it's a compliment, sir.
Thank you, sir.
He's educated?
Huh?
He's educated.
And but they say you're educated.
That's another thing about faith, and you don't know what that endorsement that you just gave me would do. Because I've been trying to get something accomplished all the time, and coming from your reverend, if that doesn't do it as a man of God, well, I don't know.
You're not lost.
I know, I got faith. I got faith. But anyway, so this person told me, as they made the comment, then they said, so you're a Christian? I said, well, let's just put it this way. On that great day, both you and I will end up in the same place. She said, will you try to send me going to hell? I said, I just said that both of us will end up in the same place. Why did you think it's hell? Good evening, thank you for holding.
I just wondered, to close off the education thing. Are we saying that we should not educate people above a certain level?
No. We're not saying, well, I'm not saying that, and I don't think that the others are saying that. What we are equating it to, work with me. When Jesus said, it's hard for a rich man to enter. You remember that?
Yeah.
He didn't say you must not become rich, because he blessed the rich people. And in fact, in one of the illustrations he gave, when he took away the little from a fellow, you know who he gave it to? A fellow who had plenty. So there are those who have plenty, who are very educated, but who understand, who wouldn't overthrow Jesus. So you get the point now?
But in practical terms. In
practical terms, there were some people who do it like Satan.
Okay.
So there will be some who...
Let us look at what reality exists now. Where we're faced with declining numbers in church, declining spirituality, and I imagine that we're trying to assign, well, we have to assign some reason to it, although we can't really fight against it if we don't understand it, right? And so I'm wondering what is it that is responsible for this decline? Because, you can look at it in another way, Bear in mind our history, for instance, where our oppressors essentially used religion against us. You would expect a backlash at some point. Alright? So you have that to deal with. I don't know how we can deal with it.
No, caller, I get the point that you're making, but what I would say is peace be still. Because we're so worried about the multitude that is slipping away. The word must be fulfilled. Somewhere it is written, many are called but few are chosen. So there will be many of us. Okay? But only few will enter. And that sounds harsh, but the word must be fulfilled. You agree with that?
Well, I guess if that's the word, yes, to be fulfilled, yes.
But
Don't you find that you use the word has, but wouldn't that be a turn off for a lot of people, the same people you're trying to get back into the straight and narrow?
But it must be that way. Michael Jordan, work with me. Michael Jordan, who is arguably the greatest basketball player in the world, was explaining one day. He gave an account of how many shots he took over his lifetime. He told you how many he missed and how many he made. Guess what? He missed much more than he made, but yet he is known as the greatest player in the world. Right? So it is important for us to understand that a lot are not going to make it, but those that do, it will fulfill the word. That is how it is supposed to be. Part of my upbringing and part of my arguments when I'm making my case, I always point out that most time I lose. Sometimes I win. But I'm no loser. So that's about it. We will not get the multitude.
You won't get the multitude.
No.
And you're okay with that?
But it's not whether or not I'm okay. That is like asking me if I'm okay with what God did.
But what
you see, you listen. Walk with me. We must not get too smart, so smart that we begin to think that we can remake the world. Always remember that. Right? There comes a point, you reference it as following me blindly. I term it as walk with me. In some instances, you got to just believe. If you have, and all of us have, that area of the brain that allows you the capacity. Brother Lewis called it faith.
That has been used to justify a multitude of sins. That is the problem I'm having.
No, but you must not have that problem, because when Satan was trying to walk with but when Satan was trying to fool Jesus, is the scriptures he used, you know? But that doesn't mean you must not believe in the scripture.
Exactly.
Okay.
Point.
So don't be dismayed, brother. Reverend, how can this fellow walk with me? Just hold on, Reverend. How can this fellow get to your church or get some further teaching? Where do you all go? Methodist?
Yeah, Charleston Methodist Church, right there.
Well, that's okay. We'll give him the correspondent church in St. Kitts, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring people into the fold.
I'm an Anglican. I mean, it is not I'm not an atheist or anything like that.
No, we're not saying that. We're not saying that. Walk with me. But see what happens, right? If I'm making a case to you, and I'm trying to show you the way, I get it, you go to a church already. So we're not going to debate that. There's an illustration that Jesus made as well. It sounds harsh too, but he said, let the dead bury their dead. Walk with me. Don't bring along that. You know what I'm saying? So, we're going to get you into the church so that you can hear the instruction, and then by faith, by next session, we'll be able to say you are a practicing Christian. As Edric Stanley would say, are you following me?
Why should I follow you?
No, I didn't. I just asked if you're following me.
I haven't had my questions answered, put it that way.
No,
Right?
no. Work with me. I get it. You didn't have your question answered. I get it. You have a lot of other things you would like to tell me. But what I'm asking you, are you following me?
Well, yeah, you're basically saying
Hello,
get more help, right?
Hello. Are you following me? I, as a fellow, don't use big words because I don't know them.
No, there's no big words in
Okay, good. So they should work with me.
I'm just paraphrasing you. Is that what you mean?
Are you following me?
I'm not sure I'm following you.
You're not sure,
And that's why I asked for clarification. Do you mean that you think I should get help from somewhere else?
No. I'm saying the instruction or the explanation that I give, if you understand.
I can't say I do.
You can't say you do.
No.
Okay, I'm going to keep working because I'm the hardest working man in this business.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah. You must have faith, yeah.
I do.
Right. Okay then.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting interacting with this gentleman, the caller, because he posed a statement declining numbers in the church. And if I were to meet him on the street and engage him, I would ask him for proof. And I would ask him for proof simply on this grounds.
Brother Bailey, why don't we take this? You'll ask him for proof. We'll come back to that. Thank you for holding. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Interesting program. I haven't listened to one for a while, and I just happened to tune in when I'm in my car, so I heard you. Anyhow, this call is to enlighten you, Webbo, on something you said. I think you made a reference to scripture, I think it's Matthew 22:14. You said, many are called, but few are chosen. And it seems as though you were saying that persons would be called to be Christians, but only a few would enter into heaven. And I think that is where you are going. Whether you want to heaven, the promised land, to go with God, so that is where you are, from what I understand, is where you are going. But the scripture that goes with that, it was talking about the master, rich man, invited some people to a wedding.
Okay, that's
and some of them didn't come.
Yeah, but that's not where I was going though.
That's where you were going.
That's
because
not.
The correct thing is that many are called to this feast. Many are called and who go to church. Many are asked to give themselves to Christ, but few choose to do that. And so when the many are called, few chosen, few chose to accept the Lord as their Savior. Many would hear the message. Some would even dare go to the altar. Some would even dare weep. But they have not made that decision to trust in the Lord. So many are called, but a few would choose to accept the Lord as their Savior. So that is, I just wanted to highlight that just in case there are others who would feel like many are called, but only few going to go in, only few God will accept. Because people normally say that. But I just want to make it clear.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Okay, so what I was saying is this, that I was telling the caller, and one of the things that you got to understand, you don't worry about the numbers, because you're worried about there's so many people here, there, and everywhere. And that is, the word must be fulfilled. There'll be a lot of people out there. When Jesus sent his disciples out, he knew he wouldn't get everybody. He knew he wouldn't get the majority. Right? There's a lot of people there, but you're not going to get everybody. Many are there, but you're only going to get a few. And that's okay. Now, so caller, so that is the point I was making. The second thing about it is this. So caller made an important point. Reverend said earlier that he gave me some commendation. Thank you again, Reverend. And he has a story behind it. And I got my early instruction from the church. And just like sometimes with other folks, it came a time that I wasn't as regular. And so I was scolded. And looked upon as an outcast. And it was reported that I had turned my back on the church. I don't go anymore. So I'm a fellow that I wouldn't say I don't tell lies, or I prefer to tell the truth. So I submit, I said that is true. I don't go as much anymore, but the problem is I left the church, but didn't really leave, I didn't get to go as because of certain circumstances, but let's just put it that way. But I took the teachings with me, and according to Reverend, the evidence is clear. So it seems to me that Jesus wouldn't mind that at all. Because the people who were scolding me still remain in the church. But they throw away the teachings. Reverend, that makes sense. You don't have to come in. So it is important for us to understand that what I hear a lot of people argue sometimes, and that's why sometimes I use general terms. For instance, I said, somewhere it is written. Because some people are going to debate and they're so good at telling you, oh, it's in Matthew chapter thing, verse so and so. That's not the point. That's not going to get you there. If you understand and you do as instructed, that's what's going to get you there. And I'm working. By the end of the night, I might cross the other side. Who knows?
Amen.
I'm already being called brother. Yes, Brother Bailey.
I have been assigned to preach in Cotton Ground on Sunday. Maybe I should just play this tape.
Well, we got it. So.
But I was commenting on the premise that the caller had made earlier about declining numbers in church. I would want to have a debate because I'm not sure when we talk about declining numbers in church, if we're talking about declining numbers in the four big ones, Methodist, chapel, church, mission, and Roman Catholic. Because if you check now, there's so many more churches on the island, in the Federation. And it seems to be on a Sunday or a Saturday that a lot of them have a lot of people in attendance. So while there might be a decline in the established quote-unquote churches, there is growth in the numbers, and the numbers might be declining in the one but growing in the others, different denominations, but it's all church.
I kind of agree with you, Brother Bailey, because in our society, not in just this topic, we have a history of making conclusions based on bad premises that we think unscientific, without data, without evidence.
Right.
No, and I'm going to do that now as well, because when the period of time that we are comparing to, which is maybe 30 years ago or so, how many churches it had?
Church, chapel, mission.
Right.
Roman Catholic.
Okay. And those days we said we used to have a lot of people in church. Okay. 200-300 each, or as the case may be, for 1,000 on a Sunday morning. Okay. How many churches we have now?
Nearly 100.
More than 100, I was told. But I have a lot of pastor friends,
There you go.
Yeah. So let's say 100. 100 by 10 each gives us What figure?
The population of Nevis.
My arithmetic told me that you see what I'm saying. So we on that simple scenario, we have more people going to church now than before. Now that is just logic or rational. So, but it's easy to do the numbers.
Yeah.
It is easy to do the numbers by just saying, okay, brother Lewis, you go to with Charleston Methodist, and I say, Brother Lewis, on average, what's your role on a Sunday? Average. Sometimes you're going to get more, sometimes less, but on average, what are you going to say? 30, 40? 50, 60. 50, 60. Okay. And then you multiply that by 100 churches. Some may not be 60, some are, you see what I'm saying. So we don't do that. So I don't know if that's really the problem, because a lot of people are still going to church, and this society, this community knows the Bible.
Yes.
In terms of what is written there.
What I find, however, is that with all what you just said and be proven right, when we were growing up and going to church, there was a lot of people my age young, and we were going to church. So we find a lot of young people in church. But I still yet to find out what we have done, our generation, to keep those children away. The few that comes, most of the time they don't come with parents or guardian. They've been sent, or they drop off and they go. And it is the people of our generation. Our generation, people who grew up in the 60s and 70s, we dropped the ball. We have not carried on with the children that we have, like how our grandparents did with us.
How many people think that we are complaining society, like to complain?
Yes, that's standard almost everywhere you go. People complain about almost everything.
Okay, so that's what our generation do. You were wondering what we do. We drop the ball. So the ball we pick up is just complain.
Complain. We're not doing what our foreparents did, by making sure that we follow the principles that we ourselves are now better for it. I don't care what people say when it comes to things like that,
So,
for instance, I'll give you a good example. We would say, when we were growing up, capital punishment for us was like, we get it left, right, and center. Now we don't discipline our children. But what had that done for us, those of us who were getting capital punishment at home or at school? Did it make it any worse? I don't think so. Because I could give you stories, it's because of those same things that we were doing that we get punishment for. We look back and say, boy, we were wrong, we get licks, but it ain't make us any better, any worse. We are here, and we are carrying on as responsible people in the society, in the community. That is how I look at it.
Yeah, you ever heard a phrase, different strokes for different folks?
That's right.
No, you might argue or criticize me, say I'm playing young, but that's okay. Because sometimes I rule on the side of the young people.
Yourself?
No, because you got capital punishment and came out to something doesn't mean that they have to get capital punishment to come out to something. You agree with that?
I agree with that.
Okay, so let's forget about that then, the capital punishment, and focus on the come out to something. What you ought to do now if you have decided, well, the capital punishment, for whatever reason, leave that, then you need to go deep in your brain to find out what can you do that will get the same result, which is come out to something.
Well, truth be told, I didn't use that on my children.
And they come out to something?
And they come out to something.
Okay, so then stop arguing that case.
No.
Or you're still going to argue
It's
it?
part of the factor, Webbo. It's part of the part of the issue.
Yeah, but what I'm
You can't
saying...
leave out that part of it. I mean, you're going to get the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but that part is part of it.
Okay.
Today, children are not being disciplined, and I'm not talking about capital punishment now. They're not being disciplined the way they should be disciplined. They're allowed to run free. That never happened in our time.
Right, I get you. But what I'm saying is, to correct that, you now ought to find something that will correct that. Now, you see me here sitting, and the equipment around me that I'm using now is not the equipment in terms of technology that I was using in 1988. But I'm getting the same results. People are still listening, people are calling in, and we're having great exchange, right? But they're now calling in by different means, they're viewing by different means, etc., etc., etc. What if I had been a superstar and say, no, that's not what we were using in 1988 when we were getting these particular results? The objective is to get the results. We're using different means and different technology, and I'm not harping and talking about go bring back the cassette deck and the tape and the recorder. That makes sense now?
Makes sense.
Okay, so now let me make my closing argument. So go forth and get the results with the now generation without keep harping on this capital punishment.
Is that no? I'm not. I was just using that as an example.
Well, what I'm saying is,
But we could use. You would agree with me that children are not as disciplined as we were.
yes,
Well, and why so?
because we are failing to put in the proper and adequate process or whatever it is to get the result, which is to have them disciplined.
And it's not across the board, right? It's not for everybody, but the majority of it.
Well,
And yeah, we have to work on that. Yes, I agree.
Well, the capital punishment wasn't for everybody. People were using different methods too. Those days. You didn't know that?
Me, I can't remember that.
No, there were some people who never used to get licks like me, you know? You didn't know that?
Why were very few?
What? But there were people.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so you see, we go again. There were very few, but when I started to count them up, you must find, there was really more than few. But anyway, the point is that's what we ought to do. Instead of keeping complaining that, boy, that's the way we used to do it and we come out this way, that's fine. That was then. We need the same result, but we're going to use a different conduit.
Well, I don't like to use myself as an example, but in this case I will. I didn't use that.
Right.
But my children, as far as I could tell.
But all you do, you just keep strengthening my point,
Right? So
which is good.
I was just using the broad statement about capital punishment because you know that we went through that, right?
Right, but okay. Who else got another point they'd like to make? We're closing down now. So we got this topic. This is what we are focusing on. What else are we going to do? What else we're doing to try to see whether or not we can get people, you know, closer towards being practicing Christians, We just gave one of the callers an invitation, to get to a church, get further instruction and stuff like that. I get the feeling, that fellow I like to engage in, he fits under sometimes the heading, in my view, of a person who you can make the case with, but he would say, okay, no. Edric used to agree with every point you make and then tell you, you say, so I did so and so, you say yes. You did so and so, yes. Everything is, no. Boy, I miss that fellow.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's that. Engagement, engagement.
Yeah.
But I know we're winding down, but I think as we look at the topic that we had before us, right, one of the things I realized that those three things, main things, the Christian values, the church and the community, are intertwined. It's as if you can't do one without the other. And if we could get to understand those three things, I think the community itself and we ourselves as Christians in whatever form, and get you to be on our side, Webbo, that not just Nevis will be a better place, but Nevis being a better place would encourage St. Kitts to be a better place. St. Kitts and Nevis being a better place will get maybe the Leeward Islands to be a better place, and then the world. And I think that is what Jesus was really saying in his message when he sent his disciples out to say, Spirit of the Lord is upon me to do this and to do that, and to make sure, bind up the wounds of the broken-hearted, and so on and so on. Right? So I think if we focus more on these three things, right? Carry out the Christian values and the church as a body. We can't do it single-handedly. Otherwise you just want to send them out 2 by 2 and so on, right? That was Jesus' command. Go out, send them 2 by 2. The founder of our Methodist Church had a principle with the church is alive today because of that. When he find he couldn't handle it by himself, he formed people into groups of 12. And he put somebody in charge and somebody to second. And that's how the church grew to where it is today. So we kind of, in the Methodist Church, kind of dropped that in a way, because it's not what it used to be. But I think sometimes you have to go back to the old way of doing things in order to get things new. Maybe use a new method, but the principle of doing what our forefathers of Methodism did, it still can work today, but it's not working at when it started. And one of the statements he said the world is his parish. The world is his parish. So when they were trying to clamp him down in England in the Anglican Church to don't go out and preach on these highways and the byways, he get excommunicated from the Anglican Church. Hence we have the Methodist Church now. So that's my last piece on that.
Okay, who's got the last word? Reverend?
Okay. Well, in our theme tonight was Christian values and its importance in church and community life. And the last word I would leave with us is, Jesus said to his disciples that he gives them, and by extension us, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another. I think of all the Christian values, and they were identified by all three of us tonight, and by you too, Webbo, that commandment,
Brother Webbo.
Brother Webbo, that commandment that Jesus gave us, I think, it's like it tops them all. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another, and by this shall all men know that you are my disciples. So I ask us all in our community and across the diaspora tonight to demonstrate more love to one another. That's my closing.
That's the last word from the Reverend. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Join Keats Carborough on Thursday evening at 8 o'clock for Government at Work, a place where you can spend all of your evenings right here on the Eastern Caribbean Spa House. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. Thought that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program are solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect